last week when I prepared the shir for Mishpatim, I forgot to mention to you that there was no shkolim, there was no Parsha Shkolim also accompanying it, because usually Parsha Mishpatim is Shabbos Parsha Shkolim also. And the next time that it will not be again coupled together with Parshas Mishpatim will be in 20 years. Meaning for the next 20 years, 19 years, when we will have Parshas Mishpatim, it will always be together, coupled with Parshas Mishpatim, together with Parshas Shkolim. Now, this week we have Parshas Terumah, which really begins a 5-parsha segment. Parshas Terumah, Tetzaveh, which deals with the Big Day Kahuna, then Kisisa, then Vayakil, Pekude, all talking about the Mishkan. And we are introduced to the Mishkan in our Parsha this week, Parshas Terumah. And we know that the Mishkan served Klal Yisrael for 479 years. 39 years in the Midbar, in the desert, because it did not become usable and have the daily karbanos and everything until the first year and 15 days after they left Mitzrayim. They left Mitzrayim on the 15th day of Nisan, and on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which was a year and 15 days later, that Hukam HaMishkan, and they began the actual service. And the Mishkan ran for those 479 years until Shlomo HaMelech built the first Beis HaMikdash, and then the Mishkan did not serve as a daily unification, a uniting force between Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the Baal Shem Tov asks that in Parshas Mishpatim, the last segment of Mishpatim was about Klal Yisrael being makabel the Torah. The famous statement, Nasa v'nishma, is stated there. And the Baal Shem Tov wants to know that why in the world do we go from Har Sinai, the Bas Kol, the everything that happened with Klal Yisrael, the unbelievable Nisim v'Niflaos that took place by Kabbalas HaTorah? And why is it that the construction of the Mishkan is the very next thing that the Torah discusses? So the Baal Shem Tov answered, is because the Mishkan represents action. And you can be in the most lofty, auspicious state of being under any circumstances, and you become inspired, you become uplifted, you become in a frame of mind wanting to do. The next thing immediately that you have to do after the inspiration is bring it into action. Because many people have been inspired and they listen to a speech, or they learn a blot Gemara, or they are in the midst of, in their shul, the shiurim that take place, and they are placed on a plateau of higher than what they were an hour before. And in their minds, oh, this is what we're going to do, and this is what I'm going to continue with that. And it never happens. So the message of why Matan Torah, and then followed right away by Terumah, is because Terumah represents action. The action of Klal Yisrael responding. Now, the Briska Mishpacha, either Reb Chaim or the Beis Halevi, one of them, asked a question, why did we need the Mishkan? At the beginning of the Seder it says, V'yasu li migdosh, make for me the tabernacle, the Mishkan, v'shachanti b'sochem, and I'm going to dwell there. So the Briska Mishpacha asked, we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in every inch of the earth and the universe, and that there isn't a drop that's not filled with Him, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu need? A designated place. And He says, V'shachanti b'sochem, so I could dwell there with my Shekhinah. So they answer and say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to set up and to bring about the possibility of wanting and desiring to thrive and strive for greater, bigger, and better. And what does that mean? Because the Mishnah says that there are 10 different levels of Kedusha in Eretz Yisrael. Meaning that Eretz Yisrael is holy, and as many get off a plane in Eretz Yisrael, they kiss the ground. But that land where they are, in the airport, is not equal to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is holier. And even Yerushalayim, it's not equal to the Har HaBayis, to the Temple Mount. And the Temple Mount has places that's holy. There is the Ezras Yisrael, there's the Ezras, all different levels, till we come to the actual Beis HaMikdash. And after we're in the Beis HaMikdash, there are different levels of everything and anything. Even you come to the Kodesh, which had the Mizbeach HaKetoris or Mizbeach HaZahav, or the Mizbeach Pnimi. There were 3 names for that, where they brought the incense, the Ketoris. And you had there the Shulchan, and you had the menorah, 3 things. But still, it didn't equal to the Kedusha of the Kodesh Kodoshim, where you had the Aron and you had the Torah inside the Aron, and only the Kohen Gadol had reshus to go in there. Yom Kippur once a year, and that was it. Now, that is in place, but there's such a thing as time, and there's such a thing as nefesh, as all the Sfarim talk about the 3 divisions. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that when a Yid keeps the Torah and he feels he's at a certain level, he should never be satisfied. So he set into the total system of the world that there should be a level of growth and a vision of greater and better, and that we don't just stagnate and pat ourselves on the back. Oh, I made a Siyum HaShas. once in 7.5 years, and I'm in the middle of and about to make a second Siyam HaShabbat. Not bad. By patting ourselves on the back, we don't get many places. We could grow, but we could go to greater and better and bigger. Where does that koyach come from for wanting and desiring the bigger and the better? From the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Mishkan and put his Shekhinah in there because it was an intensification of his Kedusha and Tahara more than in the places. Yes, he's everywhere in the world, but not as big as in the Mishkan. That means there was a dose of spirituality which permeated every nook and cranny, every corner of that Mishkan. And when it came in to the Oil Moed in the Mishkan, that there was a reaction, such a drenched feeling of Kedusha. Anyone who came by it, anyone who came near it, in the Mishkan and in the places of the Mishkan. But where do we get that desire to grow and to reach out heavenward and keep doing it to the day that we return our neshama to heaven, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We get it by the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that intensification of his Kedusha in the Mishkan. And to be able to strive to get there, and to be able to then go from there to the next level. Now, it says, V'yikchu li Terumah. And the Medrash says, and Rashi brings it right down, Gimel Trumos Nemra Kan, that there were 3 different gifts that Klal Yisrael gave for when they donated and they participated in collecting and producing the necessary vessels and items that were necessary for the Mishkan. And Rashi tells you, the Chazal, that the first gift was used for the Adonim. Now the Adonim were the sockets that held the boards of the Mishkan. That was the first Terumah. The second Terumah was for the actual operational aspects of the Mishkan. That means once the Mishkan was standing, and if you wanted to bring a korban, you had to buy an animal. I mean, whoever owned the sheep and the cattle and the things there, they had to go to them and purchase it. So the money of the second Terumah went for the operational items. And the third was the capital building. That means they had to produce gold and silver and walls and everything that they had. And that was the third Terumah. So everyone discusses it, that we understand that there was an operational expense, and the dynamics of all of the operation of the Mishkan, it cost the matbeya. It cost money. So that was a main expenditure that was there. And that we understand that for the actual building of it, you had a big expenditure. But to single out a third expenditure of Adonim, I mean, we had 10 things in the Mishkan that were much higher, and much more Kedusha. Why would that have equal status to all the korbanos and the money for all the operation and to the actual building, the Terumah of the Adonim? And the answer that the Chazal say is because Adonim represent foundation. And every foundation in Klal Yisrael has to be with the most solid beginning in its formation and in its maintenance, to make sure that the level is not only stagnated, but it goes from level to level. So the Adonim, like when a person gets married, when my students used to ask me, how you have Baruch Hashem in your house, you have guests, when did that begin? And I'd answer them the truth. The Shabbos after Sheva Brachos we had in our house, Baruch Hashem, that very first Shabbos after, in the first month we were married, 8 guests. Because when you start and you don't put off, you're going to have a level of achievement and growth go from good to better. But if you say when you get married, we just got married and we have to catch our breath, and yeah, we want guests, and you wait 3 months and then you have one, so you're going to end up with another 3 months till you have another one. And that goes for the chosin who comes home after a day either of learning or working, and does he go to a shir at night, or does he fall on the couch and just kick off his shoes and relax and take the evening off after a day of learning or a day of work? But if he right away begins with a shir and begins with a chesed, that's how it's going to continue in its speedy motion throughout his life. The Adonim represent all that I just said. Everything had to stand and depend on the formation and on the firmness and the strength of these Adonim to hold the boards, to hold the wall. And therefore it was given equal status to everything else, even korbanos. Now, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh makes a point of asking a question which is a striking question. We know that there were 15 things that were used for the gold, the silver, zov, kesef, nechoshes, ve'elim me'adamim, ve'oros techoshem, va'atzei shitim. There were different items. And it's listed in the pasuk according to its value. So, for instance, gold is more valuable than silver. That's why it listed gold first and silver second and copper third, and down the list. But when we come at the end of the entire list of the 15 things, it says va'avnei shoam, va'avnei miluim, that there were precious stones. Some say it was sapphire, some say it was diamond, but stones of great value. So asks the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, if you're listing it in the order of value, why are you putting the Avnei Shoam and the Avnei Miluim at the end? After the oil and the hairs and the... And he answers a few terutzim, and I'm going to share with you 2 of the answers. The first thing is that if you take a look in Parshas Vayakel in 3 weeks, you will see that it says when there's a repetition of much of Terumah in Vayakel, and it says who brought the Avnei Shoam and the Avnei Miluim. It was brought by the Shivtei Ko. That means the princes of each tribe brought it. And why are they listed last? So says the Orach Chaim, and the reason I'm saying this now is because the Orach Chaim HaKodesh brings it in our Parsha. In other words, even this statement of Hanasiim, Heviu, is in Vayakel, but he brings what he wants to say right here. And that's why I'm sharing it with you. And if you look at the word in Vayakel, on the word Vahanasiim, it's pronounced Nasiim. But if you look at the word, there's no yud in it. There was lacking. And Rashi brings the Chazal, and the Orach Chaim HaKodesh brings it here in our Sedra, that the Nasiim said, when they heard everything that is required to be given by Klal Yisrael, said, you know what? Let the whole Klal Yisrael bring what they can, and anything missing, the deficit, that's like saying to an administrator in a yeshiva, you need $3 million a year for your yeshiva budget. Let the Gevirim and the people give him whatever they give in, and whatever's missing, if it's only $2.5 million, we will bring you, or I will bring you the $500,000 that's missing. So that's really the dream of an administrator, that he's promised that whatever the missing part, the deficit, someone's going to make up. But the Torah did not look favorably at the Nasiim. They said because they were told, that's your enthusiasm? We're telling people to put together the necessary funds and items that we need to have a Mishkan. Everyone should magnetically jump forward to participate, to bring something. It looks like a lazy attitude. Okay, listen, whatever's missing, we will bring. And if nothing's missing, that means you wouldn't bring anything. So that's why the Yud, the Gemara says it and the Medrash brings it, that the Yud is missing in the word Vahanasim, which is usually spelled with a Yud, referring to all of the princes, those 12 that said this. And says the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, because that was their attitude, what they brought was listed last, because it did not have the chashivas. Like there was a yeshiva around 100 years ago that was in Europe, was building a new, it could have been Kletsk, it could have been Baranovich, it could have been one of the Litvish yeshiva, that they were building a new building. They had a very shabby old building. And the Rosh Yeshiva of that yeshiva took, when everyone was bringing their donations, the elderly ladies, that means the old women who were in the 80s or their 90s, they brought their little knippel, their little handkerchief that had their pennies, their coins gathered, and that's all they had. These were old almonas or old people unable to come in with a large sum. And the Rosh Yeshiva of that yeshiva cried when they came in, Because when the elderly lady came in, she was crying that she was able to be zoicha to bring her pennies and her nickels and her dimes into the yeshiva, or whatever the coin was at that time. That she was able to come in and participate in the building of the new shul that was being constructed in her town. And that is, says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the reason that the Medrash says that, a different opinion, that the Nesiim went out to find the precious gems and purchase them for the Avnei Shoyam and the Avnei Miluim, but they couldn't find. And where did it come from? It came from the Medrash says that birds from Gan Eden brought down the Avnei Shoyam and Avnei Miluim and put it by the doors of the Nesiim, by their front door, and they picked it up and brought it in. And says the Meforshim that the reason that it came down from heaven was because they were lacking, like I told you, in attitude. And they didn't want anything that didn't come from blood, sweat, and tears. This is the Olam HaMaisa. This is the world of action and deed. And if a person, as I've said to you on occasion, that if a person has the greatest kavanas of the Arizal putting on tefillin, but he doesn't actually put the tefillin on, he just sits there for 2 hours thinking about all of the kavanas, he does not get a drop schos of the mitzvah. Because this is the oilam ha'maisa, the oilam ha'action, and you have to do the mitzvah to be makayim the mitzvah. And since the Nesiim didn't produce the attitude of jumping forth like everyone in Klal Yisrael ran, and they even finished it early because when one of the reasons for the Mishkan was a kapara for the Egel Hazav, the golden calf. And the problem with the golden calf was Klal Yisrael had no patience. It was the 40th day that Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to come down, and he didn't come down early in the day, so they jumped the gun and they made the ego. But he did come down on the 4th, but later in the day. And had they had the patience to wait, then it would have been produced the Geula Shlema, as all the Kadmonim say that Mashiach, the Geula, would have come. And all of our suffering for these 3,400 years is because they didn't have the patience. And that's why when the Mishkan was made, they ran so fast to bring the items that the Mishkan was completed by Hanukkah. This was Mimochras Yom Kippurim, that the day after Yom Kippur, that Tzivui came to them, we're building a Mishkan and bring me the items, and they brought it so fast that it was done by Hanukkah. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, you are not going to begin because you have to learn a lesson in patience of how to wait for something and not expect it immediate in your hand. You cannot expect it immediately. And therefore you have to wait till Rosh Chodesh Nisan to begin the functioning and the daily activities of everything in the Mishkan, the Korbanos, the Ketoros, the everything that took place. Now, the actual items in the Mishkan, Moshe Rabbeinu was told what to make, and he gave the instruction to Betzalel and to Klal Yisrael Bechlal, but he was like the architect, the engineer. He was only bar mitzvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the pasuk says, "V'amalei also," not in this pasuk, but it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, "I'm giving him Ruach HaKodesh to know and to understand." But Moshe Rabbeinu instructed them what they had to do and what they had to make. So he understood everything. Yet, the Chazal say when it came to the menorah, Niskasha Moshe b'masa menorah. He suddenly, Hashem told him about the menorah. He didn't know what was going on. He had no idea what is it supposed to be and why not. He understood the Mizbeach, which was intricate. He understood the Shulchan. He understood the Mizbeach Hazov, the Mizbeach HaNachoshis, where you brought the Korbanos. He understood the Shulchan. So why couldn't he, for the life, and it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw he didn't understand, so he showed him how the menorah looked, and he still didn't understand. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu told, you know what? Take a chunk of gold, throw it into the fire, and out came the menorah. Why was the menorah the only thing that he couldn't understand? And what do Chazal say about it? So I want to tell you two things in response. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted visionaries amongst each and every Yid, that in their lifetime they have a goal, they have a purpose, and the striving is part and parcel of having a real vision. Now, visionary ability and capabilities could be at every level. A Talmud Chacham is a visionary, I haven't learned Rambam for 3 years, and say this year is the year I must, and his vision is to finish Rambam. You have someone that needs parnasa and he opens up a shop. And some people could say, look, I'm not looking to become a multimillionaire. I hope that I'll work and put my efforts into my shop and I'll have parnasa. I'm not interested in having 6 other stores open from this store. I'm happy with just the one. And others say that once I'm putting my effort into having this store, I want to see that the sky is the limit. I could end up with 100 divisions, 100 different stores built from this store. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted, and what Yidden would do in this world, in Olam Hazeh, to have a vision. And sometimes in striving for the actual vision to come true, there are many stumbling blocks. And a person should learn to never give up. Never. And what happened? Moshe Rabbeinu had an idea of a menorah, but he couldn't put it together. And there were stumbling blocks. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself showed him the menorah, and he still didn't understand. Otherwise, it would have looked like Hashem was teasing him, because Hashem knew at the very beginning he's not going to understand, and he's going to have to do this and do this and do that. So why did he even start off this whole business with showing him and just produce the menorah? He's not going to understand. But Hashem wanted that this power of providing Klal Yisrael with wanting to have a vision, and even when the vision, sometimes you slip and you can't come up with the proper vision, you can't come up with it because you don't understand, or there's difficulties, or there's no hatzlacha. Don't give up. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows every move that you're making, and there are sometimes products and things that never end up coming to fruition. And that's part of the divine plan also, that you could have in a prior Gilgal have opened a store, and you were taking the customers away from the next guy who was an Oraman, a poor man, and struggling to bring out a parnasa. And you had more money than he did, so you went and opened the store, and you were taking his. At the end, he had to close his store. And you came back as a Gilgal to open a store and to fail as your tikkun. So we don't know the cheshbonos, we don't know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what he does want, doesn't want from us. But we have to be ready for the master plan, and with our human faculty and ability, strive for the best and better no matter what happens. That was why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't fully understand. And the second reason I want to say is we know that in the menorah that Aaron HaKohen went and lit, as you look into Parshas Baloscha, that the Ramban talks about it, that Aaron HaKohen fought that when he lights that menorah, he wanted the Or HaGonos, that original light, to be in that menorah. And not only in his menorah, that when there'll be menorahs from the story of Hanukkah, that Klal Yisrael will light their menorahs until Mashiach comes, and in their menorahs, in their ner, in that flame will be the Or HaGonos. Not only in his menorah in the Mishkan, but in all of their menorahs. Now the Or HaGonos is pure Ruchni. That's why when Adam HaRishon ate from the Eitz Hadas, and he didn't wait, again, a problem with patience, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, you're created in the 9th hour, that's 3 o'clock. Wait till 6 o'clock, you can take the grapes and make Kiddush at 6 o'clock. He couldn't wait, and he didn't wait. And that's why we are still being misaken the pagam since then. And nothing else was taken away from the world except the original light, the Or, which had such kedusha in it that because of his avera he lost that original light, and it was taken away and put away till Mashiach comes. Aaron didn't want Klal Yisrael to have to wait until Mashiach comes for that Or HaGonos. So he brought it down in the flame in the Mishkan that he lit every day. And that his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grand, after Hanukkah until Mashiach comes, will have that Or HaGonos in their menorahs. However, Moshe Rabbeinu, as big as he was, and we know he was the biggest human being to ever live in the Olam Hazeh, to make that menorah that was going to possess the Or HaGonos, the Or, which the real light for the world, which will come back when Mashiach reveals himself, as big as he wasn't big enough to make that basic item, that vehicle for not only the Shekhinah, but for the Or HaGonos, which was bigger than anything. He as a human being couldn't make it. It had to come directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, There is a story with the Mizritcha Maggid, who was the successor to the Baal Shem Tov for 11 years. That means all these tzaddikim we talk about, Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev and the Mizritcha, the Koznitzer Maggid and the Balatanya and all of these people, these tzaddikim gemurim, were Talmidim and Chasidim of the Mizritcha Maggid, who from 1761 till 1772, when he was nifter, led the group. And one day, a man came into the Mizritcha Maggid and he said, Rebbe, I want to ask you, in Parshas Terumah, it says that in the Kodesh, that the menorah was on the southern side of the area called Kodesh. And on the northern side was the Shulchan. Now the Gemara says that since the menorah was on the southern side, a person, if he wants, the Gemara says, Haroitza lahachkim, a person who wants to become very wise and a big Talmud Chacham, Yadrim, he in Shemona Esrei should face the south. Now it doesn't mean our whole body, we face the east, because of Yerushalayim, the Beis Hamikdash and all of that, but that while he's facing east, he should turn his head a little bit southward, Yadrim. And Vaharoitzen, somebody, Lehisasha, to become rich, he should face north. Because it says that the Shulchan, which represents Parnosa and money, was in the northern side, the northern wall of the Kodesh. So my question to you, said this Yid to the Mizritcha Maggid, is what do you do if both things someone wants? He wants to become wise and he wants to become rich. You can't face south and north at the same time. What does he do? And as Rav Zevin brings in his Sipurei Chasidim this story, the Mizritcha Maggid felt that this Yid who was asking him the question had a little bit conceit. He had a little bit ego, a problem of ego. So he answered him and said, we know that anything that is above this world is not toifus mokum. In other words, things that are physical take place. A table, a chair, you can't put something else there, it takes the place in Olam Hazeh. But what happens if it is an item that you see like a chair floating in the air? That's not part of natural teva. So if you rise above teva, then you're not toifus mokum. You don't capture or seize that spot. Then you could be in two places at once, north and south, because you're not Gashmi anymore. You're not physical. And that was the message to this Gvir, or this Yid, that he had to work on himself to lower the level of the conceit or the ego, to make himself a little bit more ruchni, which is ruchni, spirituality is not toifus makom. That's spiritual. And that you can be in both places at once. And I want to say to you that the Gemara in Yuma says about the Oron. You know the Oron had an outer box of gold, an inner box of gold, it was pure gold, And in between the two gold boxes, there was a box of wood, like a sandwich. You take two pieces of bread and you put the tuna fish in between. In between was the wooden box. So the Gemara says on that Kol Talmud Chacham, any Talmud Chacham, she'eno tocho kabaro, that they learn out from the Aron, that it had to be gold inside and gold outside, is not called a regular Talmud Chacham. He is not. He's not in that category. He may know a lot, but he professes to be ehrlich and to be nice and to have midos. But if he doesn't have inside a match for his outwardly appearance, and that's what he's made up of, then he's not really called and put into the category of Talmud Chacham. And the Gemara in Bracha says, and around 10 months ago I quoted this Gemara to you, but it's said on this week's Parsha, so I'm mentioning it. Some of you may have heard it, many of you may have not heard it, and even those who heard it may not remember it exactly. So I'm taking the liberty of telling you that the Gemara says there was a Talmud that walked up to Rabbi Yehoshua and asked him if myriad is a reshus or a chov. And Rabbi Yehoshua, who was probably the oldest Tana at that time living, answered, I hold it is reshus. Now we know the halacha is that the whole Klal Yisrael accepted. That's why we don't have a Chazaras Hashatz. We don't have a loud Shemona Esrei in myriad. And Liyasid Lavo, when Mashiach is going to come, myriad will then become a chov. But it's not someone's choice. Well, do I have to learn Daven myriad? Not that was the question then, not today. And then Rabbi Gamliel, who was the Nasi, walked in, and this Talmud ran up to him and asked him, Rabbi Gamliel, do you hold that myriad is a reshus or myriad is a chov? So he looked at him and he said, it's a chov, an obligation. And the Talmud said, oh, but I just asked Rabbi Yehoshua. And Rabbi Yehoshua said that it's a reshus. So Rabbi Gamliel turned to Rabbi Yehoshua. He said, what? That's what you paskin, that it's a reshus? So the Gemara says that Rabbi Yehoshua was caught. He said, I can't deny that I answered that. Now the Talmud was hoping that since Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi and you had to paskin, in other words, the Nasi made the decision in the halacha, that Rabbi Yehoshua would be forced to accept the psak of Rabbi Gamliel that it's a chov. And he just stood there. And Rabbi Gamliel turned to his shtender and began the drasha. He began a long drasha, and he left Rabbi Yehoshua standing. Because once somebody was talking with the Nasi, he wasn't allowed to sit back down till he was given permission. Even Rabbi Yehoshua, the biggest Tana. That was the reverence and the respect for the office of Nasi. So the people got very angry and said, the Gemara says, he left Rabbi Yehoshua standing? We're getting rid of him as Nasi, because this is the third time this year that he started up with Rabbi Yehoshua. There was a story with which there was Yom Kippur, and he made Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Gamliel held it was one day, And Rabbi Yehoshua held it was the next day. So on the next day, Rabbi Gamliel required Rabbi Yehoshua to bring money to him to show that he had to accept his psak, that it was not Yom Kippur like he held, but it was like he said it was, Rabbi Gamliel said it was. So they had it with him. He was starting up constantly and nonstop with Rabbi Yehoshua. So they got rid of him, the Gemara says, and they took Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah as the new Nasi. They wanted Rabbi Akiva, but they said, no, he's from Gerim, and we need the Yichus, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is the 10th generation from Ezra, and this one and that one, they're not rich enough because the Nasi had to go to Rome and plead the case for Klal Yisrael on different occasions. And if he wasn't rich enough, he didn't have that backbone and that structure to express himself with the independence and with the fortitude that a rich man could. But Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah had everything. So the problem with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was he was only 18 years old. So that's what we say in the Haggadah, that night Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah went to sleep and woke up in the morning with 18 rows of silver hair. That means he was only 18, so he looked like a youngster, but he was so great. And they took Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah as their new Nasi. So the Gemara says that the day he became Nasi, he got rid of the Shomer HaPesach. He got rid of the guard in front of the Beis HaMikdash because Rabbi Gamliel had instituted a policy that any Talmud who wanted to come learn in his Beis HaMikdash had to be Tocho Kabaro. That means the guard, who obviously, as the Chidushei Arim says, had Ruach HaKodesh. Otherwise, how could he look at his face and look at his forehead and know if he had Ruach HaKodesh or not? But with one look, he said, you could come into the Beis HaMikdash, you may not come in. And the Gemara says that 400 rows of Talmidim filled up that day because there was no Shomer HaPesach, and anyone who wanted to come in came in. And there's a second opinion in the Gemara, it was 700 rows. So it was thousands and thousands of Talmidim were added on that time, that day. And Rabbi Gamliel, who still lived right there, Chol Shadaita de Rabbi Gamliel, he became dejected, he became depressed. He said, did I push away so much Torah learning from Klal Yisrael? So the Chidushei Arim asks, Rabbi Gamliel was there the whole time he was Nasi. He saw that they were turning away hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Why suddenly did he get depressed now when there was no Shomer HaPesach? He saw there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds being turned away. What was this earth-shattering thunder and lightning that hit him that he became so dejected and so depressed by the Talmidim who came in? So says the Chidushei Arim, he became suddenly so depressed and so dejected because he always held that if someone was not a Tocho Kabaro, as inwardly holy as he professed to be outwardly, if he wasn't and he came into the Beis HaMikdash, it's going to take him 6 months to 6 years. It's going to take him the longest time to really have the level of what he has to acclaim and accomplish to become a Tocho Kabaro. But when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah sent away everyone, sent away the Shomer HaPesach, and he saw that there was the ability to come in the morning not a tochel kabaro, and to, at the end of the day, go home a tochel kabaro. And that's why he became dejected. He said, had I known in one day that someone could become a tochel kabaro, would I have sent away so many thousands of talmidim? And that is the lesson that we have to learn, that the influence of a Bais HaMedrash or a yeshiva has on talmidim, has on us. That when you sit in a row in shul, where the other three are busy talking about the stock market and Trump, and they're not there for what the purpose is, then you get dragged in, you get sucked in. And if you sit with people who don't talk during davening and are busy putting their eyes into the siddur and being makasher, uniting their neshamas with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the influence of who you are around makes all the difference. And that goes for classmates and friendships. You can be with a group of friends that you will end up much better and higher if when someone says a word of Lashon Hara, wait a second, that's Lashon Hara, let's not get into that. That sets and steers the whole conversation and the whole atmosphere in a different direction. And for those who discuss the pettiness and the nonsense, that's what your experience for that hour at lunch or in the Bais HaMedrash, whatever it is, ends up being. So we should open up our eyes and strive to become that tochel kabaro, and to utilize our influence and our personality and the charisma, whatever we possess, to direct our associations in the proper direction, because we will then ascend heavenward in everything we do, our davening, our chesed, because it's the good influences which are seeping in.